make yourself comfortable, get the best seat in the house, like your armchair or sofa and anything. This is what the virtual capability offers us, a lot of comfort. And we are back with another amazing and very insightful and promising presentation by Kim Essendrup, who will be talking about practical AI PM tools, which is quite a very interesting and on the up-to-date topic. So, Kim, first of all, really appreciate you joining us to the conference and preparing this presentation and just being with us and celebrating this special moment. And we look forward to hearing about your thoughts and insights on this topic. I don't have too much for the audience other than just use the chat, use the Q&A as you usually do, react, ask questions. We'll take them as they come. Yep, we're here. I'm gonna disappear while Kim is presenting, but I'll be here. You'll see me in the chat. And yeah, so we have for the next 45 minutes. Kim, is all yours. And Kim, I will give it up to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the introduction. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, or whatever time zone that you're in. And let's just jump into it. So, a little bit about myself. I'm a speaker, project management coach, and trainer. 20 plus year experience running projects, programs, setting up PMOs, and all that good stuff. I'm also co-host of the Project Management Happy Hour podcast. I'm also CEO and co-founder of RaidLog, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, and also author of The Ultimate Guide to RaidLog. And as I say on all my podcast episodes, I've made all the mistakes that I'm going to try to help you avoid today. So let's just jump into what today's agenda is. So my aim today is to give you a little bit peek behind the scenes of a project management software company and how we are thinking about AI for PMs and those tools. So we'll start off talking a little bit about why would we try to incorporate AI into our tool. We'll show you, I'll go through a little bit of our blueprints, what our initial goals were in integrating AI into our product. I'll talk through some of our challenges that we've had with AI in the product, and then a couple of our breakthroughs, what's working, and where we intend to go next. Things that are out of scope, we're not going to really touch on today. This is not going to be another generic, hey, is AI going to take your job, or is AI not going to take your job? We're not going to really go into that today. There's a lot of other great speakers that have touched on those topics. We're not going to talk about writing ChatGPT prompts. Again, a lot of other people are out there talking about how to do that. We're not going to touch that. We're not going to really go into ChatGPT or anything like that today. And also, and when we get into it, I'm not going to go into too much detail about our secret sauce and things we're doing behind the scenes. We're really just going to talk about how we have thought about it from a product perspective and how we want to try to help project managers. And in doing so, I hope you learn a little bit about AI and how it can be used and how software companies are thinking about it, in hopes that it helps the way you think about incorporating different AI tools into your project management tool set. And finally, Q&A, very much looking forward to Q&A, answering your questions. Happy to do that. Excuse me. All right, let's jump in. So what were our goals with artificial intelligence? So our product is called raidlog.com. And I'm not going to spend too much talking about the product, but if you've ever used a RaidLog, which is historically a spreadsheet that had risks, actions, issues, and decisions, or depending on where you're from, it might have been risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. And so what we've done is we've made a SaaS-based version of that tool that plugs into your planning tool if you use Monday or Planisware or whatever else. That's basically what it is, to give you a little background. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to say, you know what, I wonder if we can use AI to make project managers' lives easier, because as project managers know, it's tough out there, right? We've got a lot to lift. We've got a lot of challenges to work through. Our goal is not to learn tools. Our goal isn't to, play with this stuff. We need to get projects done. And so we want to be a tool that makes that a little bit easier for a project manager, or maybe takes a little stress out. And along the way, we want to try to help give tools to our customers to help them improve project delivery, and then also reduce project issues, or at least make them a little bit easier to manage. And so those were the things we identified that we wanted to try to help project leaders with. And when we started to look at artificial intelligence and add it to our product, a couple of things we wanted to be very careful of, that we thought quite a lot about, is we didn't want to be misleading. We didn't want AI to provide hallucinations or provide misinformation. We would rather not have an AI than to have one that provides bad information. So that's something we wanted to be careful of. And something we want to encourage you to do is, as you start playing with all these tools that have AI incorporated, really cast a critical eye on the output of the AI. Don't just inherently trust it. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. We also didn't want to be gimmicky in adding AI. Everybody's in this rush to put AI in there, and they'll kind of lick and stick an AI feature on to say, hey, look, we're AI enabled. And, I understand why different products want to do that. And it makes maybe some commercial sense, but we thought, if we're going to do this, we want to make sure that we provide something that actually provides real value. And so that's something that was front of mind for us. And we also didn't want to distract from the product. And we have a mission with RaidLog in that we want to really promote RAID management. We want to help project managers really focus on and learn how to manage risks and manage issues and manage and track those decisions in the tool. We wanted to find ways that provided real practical, fundamental value to these basics of project management. And we didn't want AI features to distract from our core mission, which was those features. So that's what we went into when we sat down and started thinking, how are we going to incorporate AI into our tool? And these were our goals when we sat down to do that. So let's talk about our blueprints. We said, okay, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to bring to our users. How are we going to do this? And our hypothesis is that a good AI, if it really works, should be able to help project managers identify, plan for, and respond to project risks and issues and decisions. If we could get it to do this effectively, that could be a great way to start risk identification and maybe even help with that process. And we were thinking about how does this really work in the project management toolkit, especially with a PMBOK, PMI kind of a framework methodology. And especially in PMBOK 6, for those of us who have kind of went through that or earlier versions of the PMBOK, you might recall that PMI, when it talks about identifying risks, the project manager sits down and says, okay, I've got this project. Here's my scope. Here are my assumptions. Here's what I've got to get done. The approach towards that is the PMBOK would give you different tools. It gives you a whole toolbox. So I can use brainstorming methods. I can work with my subject matter experts and sit down with them. I can work with my stakeholders. And I could do Delphi. I can do diagramming techniques. So you get this whole toolbox of different ways to identify risks. And the thought process behind that is, if we just sat down and take a one-dimensional approach towards identifying what can go wrong with our project, we're probably going to miss the boat if we don't look at it from different directions. So we want to look at this from all different directions that we can practically and identify what can go wrong. And we thought, using AI to do that, that's a whole nother tool in that toolbox. It's a whole nother way to look at it. It doesn't necessarily replace the other ways that you can look at identifying risk. It's just another really good tool in the toolbox. But things that we had to identify before we put this into the product and released it was, well, can it effectively identify useful risks, or is it just going to throw out a whole bunch of garbage? And can it reasonably recommend a priority and a response? Again, if it can't do that, then that's really not very useful. And if it can do these two things, well, what kind of projects can it do that well for? Because there may be a limited scope. We may work really well for really low-level, detailed, granular projects, but not for bigger, more broad initiatives, or maybe vice versa. Maybe it does really good at broad-based projects and programs and good at identifying risks at a high level, but at a low, very detailed technical level, maybe it's not going to do so well there. So those are the things that we had to investigate and see, okay, how well can this do? And so we started off with really detailed technical projects. Being, my partners and I have been doing this for 20 some years. So we had quite a lot of old risk logs that we could go back and dig into and pull some good data out and say, okay, how well is it going to do at this? And we started off with a very technical project, one that in former life, I did a lot of these kinds of projects, and it was a Microsoft Exchange migration. So in this case, okay, we've got 500 employees. They're currently using Microsoft Exchange 2010 on-premise for email services. And our project was to migrate those services to Microsoft Exchange online. We've got about 1.5 terabytes of mail data. We're engaging an expert third party. Our team is spread across 5 time zones. And so pretty detailed project. Honestly, not an enormous amount of detail here. It's not like my 20-page project charter or my detailed project plan, but a good description. And so we thought, well, once we had built our models and kind of started to work with them and put them all together, we said, okay, let's put it to the test and see how well it does with this. And we were astonished at how well it did. And this is the actual output from our tool, where it identified projects. So the first risk was data loss during the migration, inadequate backup strategy, technical issues during the transfer, resulting in loss of important emails and data, which results in disruption to business operations. And I don't know how many of us in the audience have a lot of experience doing email migrations. Those are starting to shrink. Most everybody's on the cloud now, but this really hit the top thing that we worry about in a mail migration. It estimated a probability and an impact score, 50% probability with an 80 score of impact on the scale of 1 to 100. And the suggested remediations were to implement a thorough backup strategy. Makes sense. Conduct test migrations to identify and resolve technical issues. Well, that's actually really, really good. And so we started to look through the rest of these risks that it came up. Network and connectivity issues. Oh yeah, we've run into that. User resistance to change. Absolutely big problem. Inadequate user training, incompatibility issues. So all these risks worked out really, really well. And we were quite impressed by the quality of the risks that came back. And more than that, how specific they were to the level of detail we had in the project. It's a technical project, and we got a lot of risks here that applied to that technology and the results of that change. So yeah, that works pretty well. Now, how far can we take it? Would this same engine respond well to a larger, broader initiative? Something like we put in a few different more business-focused changes, HR related, merger and acquisition related, and it kept coming back with really good, really pertinent risks. And so this is an important process we went through, was to really try to vet and use different kinds of projects and make sure this was really going to work for us. But we thought, how far can we push this? And so we said, well, let's do a more mega project. How big and how ridiculous can we make this project and see if it returns realistic risks? So for you Star Wars fans out there, we thought, let's see what it's going to do here. So we said, hey, AI, hey, RAID log, we're going to construct a space station capable of destroying a large planet with a giant energy beam. It should be capable of hyperspace travel and needs capacity to store, maintain, and launch 1,000 light starfighters. It also needs to have an infinity pool. So we threw in the infinity pool just for fun. And we said, well, we wonder what's going to come back on this one. And what was really astonishing is that it actually came back with reasonable risks. And it came back with big foundational problems, technical failure, the fact that it, this doesn't even really, the technology doesn't exist, and the risk log calls us out. Budget overrun. Yeah, that's probably going to be a big thing. Schedule delays. And I don't think I captured it in the screenshot, but it even brought out risks like socio-political pushback, which, yeah, if we're going to build a moon-sized space station capable of destroying a planet, there's going to be a lot of political issues. And further down the list, there were also supply chain issues, which, yeah, of course, is going to be very difficult to build something the size of the moon. That's a lot of materials that you're going to have to come up with. So, and no, there weren't any risks specific to the infinity pool, but I guess that's probably a good thing. It indicates that it really focused on the core risks. And so that's when we really realized if we can really get a low-level technical project and then something as big, mega, and honestly ridiculous as building a space station with a laser beam, we probably have something here that's really useful. And so we thought, well, let's do a blind test, right? And so, oh, here's some more of my risks that we had. So political interference, safety and security breaches. Yeah, we wouldn't want somebody hacking that. But so we said, well, let's take it into the real world and do a blind test. And one of the examples of what we did for that was our sister company is a PPM company that implements project management tools and does project management consulting. And I reached out to one of the project leaders we have in our sister company, and he is running a project. It's about a year-long project for about a 90-year-old utility contractor. They're a national across the U.S. utility contractor with about 15 offices, and they have been around a long time, and they're actually rolling out project management, an official project management role for the first time across the organization. And so we said, I wonder how well we can, let's do a test. So we got a description of the project, we put it into the tool, and we got our output. And I took the resulting risk log and I sent it off to the project manager. I didn't give him any background. I didn't tell him where I got it, who made it. I said, hey, what do you think of this list of risks? And we thought, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And they came back with these. He said that these, he didn't say AI generated risk, but he said these risks are aligned with 75 to 80% of what we had identified for the project. And so we were really excited by that. Because we figured if we could create a product that can generate, if our risk log could meet 70 to 80% of the risk, that is an enormous win. We never really wanted to be 100%, and I'll show you why in a minute, but we thought now we're really onto something. And then we continued our alphas and pilots, and we continue to get the same results. And we were really astonished. My product manager and I were just so excited about this. But then we kind of had this moment where we stopped and we said, should we? I don't know if you guys are fans of Jurassic Park, but there's a moment here where Jeff Goldblum's character says, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. And we had a real moment where, as a product team, we stopped and stepped back and said, okay, if our risk generator is so good that it can generate 70, 80% of the risks, is that potentially a risk? Because in our nightmare scenario, we could see a project manager who's really crunched for time. They go and they enter their project description, they click a button, it generates a list of risks, they dump it into the risk log, and they say, risk is done. I can go on to my other things. And then that's all they want to do with the risk log. And if you've run PMOs before or managed PMs, you know that one of the things you kind of worry about is a project manager sitting down at the beginning of a project, doing their detailed risk analysis per PMBOK, and they've got their list of 5, 10, 15, 50 risks. And then it goes on SharePoint and nobody looks at it again. And we thought, are we actually enabling that? If we can make a project manager so they're one click away from a first draft of a risk log, are we hurting the process or are we helping the process? And we stepped back and actually paused development on this so we could to think about this, because our mission is to help project managers, and we don't want to enable kind of behavior that is really detrimental to the project manager's career, to the project, to the organization. So what should we do? And we thought about this, and one thing that really came to my mind was, I don't know if you've heard this adage, but if someone can do a job 80% as well as you can, then you should delegate that task to them. And this is great advice that I got when I first started taking on leadership roles years and years ago, because when you start off as an individual contributor, you get really good at whatever it is that you do. And then once you get good at something, it's really hard to let that go and give it to somebody else, because if you're really good at, your individual contributor job, then when you give it to somebody else, they might be newer to the job, they might not have your level of experience. And so this sort of maxim of, if someone can do it 80% as well, then you should hand it over. It helps us learn to let go a little bit, manage a little bit more. And we thought of this and said, this doesn't just apply to people. This also applies to products and tools like artificial intelligence. So we thought, okay, if we think about it in terms of delegation, you can do the job. If I can give a job, a small job, risk identification in this case, if they can do it a little bit, then maybe we should consider doing this. And so this is how we started to think about it and how we move forward. And by the way, this is something I would encourage you to consider adopting any AI kind of product, whether it's our tool or anybody else's tool. If you're doing project planning or anything else, writing a charter or status reports, if you can get the tool to do it 80% as well as you can, let it do 80% of the work. And then you can focus on the 20% that remains to really take that, elevate it, make it your own, and get it done to your level of quality. As I said, that applies to AI as well. Now, we're talking about bumps. One other bump that we have run into, and you'll probably see this in other products as well, is that, and this will change over time, is as amazing as the results are, query times can be a little slow from time to time. And I say slow, but honestly, it's a matter of context. So in our tool, when you click the button and said, give me risks, it can be 90 seconds to get your risks. Depends on the complexity of your query, complexity of your project, but it can be 90 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time. In fact, if I sat us all who were in the session, we sat in the room and said, okay, let's come up with the 10 most challenging, most likely risks for a particular project, it would sure take us a lot longer than 90 seconds. But if you put that in the context of, I'm using an application and I click a button and I want something to happen and I have to sit and watch this thing spin for 90 seconds, it feels like forever. And we all get impatient. You click a button, like, come on, I clicked the button, make something happen. But this stuff takes time. And the current generation of tool that we're working on and other tools that are out there as well, they're amazingly fast at what they do, but sometimes those query times can take some time. Now, of course, this will speed up over time, but it's just something that we're kind of working through, and it's a bump that we have, and we're working to optimize our tools. But the reality is, when you use these tools, are doing amazing things. So it might be good to be patient. And I hope that I see some feedback, need something on the screen to suggest that important work is being done and it's worth waiting for. 100% agree. So we start off with just a little spinner, and we're actually working on putting some entertaining and educational quotes that kind of scroll across. We've seen other products do that, and we thought that's really good. You can have something to look at as it scrolls across. Give them an infinity pool like that. That's a good one. We may see if we can add that in the next PI. Another thing that we've run into, and this is something that you'll probably run into whenever you use tools, or something you should think about, is quality of user input. Doesn't matter how good our AI is, or anybody else's for that matter. If we don't really get good data in, we can't give good data out. We can get data out, we'll give 10 risks, but those might not be the best risks we could give you if you had given us a little bit more information. And so what I'll show you here in a moment is, we thought, well, the biggest task here, we realized the biggest task is not getting an AI to give us the right data. The biggest challenge we have, and I imagine it's the same with other tools, similar tools that are using AI, is getting you to provide the information that the AI needs to do its job. How do you know what that is? We're not all AI experts. And so what we did, and I'll show you here in a moment, is we flipped the script a little bit. And this is the foundational change for us, was to realize that the biggest value that we can do is to prompt the user, not prompt the AI. And so we are working on methods to ask specific questions of the user that are of highest value to the AI, that can help the AI do the best job it can. It's like when you delegate a task to a person. If you say, hey, go write this report for me, they need to know a little bit about what they need to write the report about. And so you need to be able to give them specific instruction. They can ask you those questions. And I'll show you that here in a moment. All right. So those were some of the bumps that we ran into. And let's talk about some of the breakthroughs. So we launched in alpha and in beta, and the feedback we got was absolutely amazing. And we were very careful to look at what was going on in the system as these queries are being run. And we were delighted to see that it did not seem to distract from our core feature and functionality. And project manager feedback was really, really strong. And the feedback we got was really that it showed a lot of value. And one of the metrics that we thought would be a very useful metric is that what we do is, when you ask the system to provide a prompt, provide a list of risks, we come back with the top 10 risks. And the user has the ability to select which of these they like. So they might say, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one, don't care about the rest. We thought this is actually scoring. This is a scoring method. So rather than forcing the PM to accept all 10 risks, we show them 10 risks, they pick which ones they want. And that instantly gives us a score that we can track as a metric to say, okay, out of every 10, all the risks that we provide, what is the percent that the project manager says these are valuable enough for me to put into my risk log? And the number that a model is learning. Yep. So we are getting a hit rate of right exactly where we wanted, which is about 70%. And that's exactly where we want to be. And I'll show you why in a moment, why we don't actually want to be 100%. By the way, speaking of not 100%, can you guys tell this is a AI generated image? See, it's got this kind of freaky hand up there. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah. And AI and this funny looking person back there. So why do we not want it to be 100%? Why not try it and go for that 100% and come back with a perfect list of risks the first time? And we've come up with the term that we coined, and we call it internally, is almost. And it's kind of a term that we came up, and I'll be publishing a couple articles on this on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, and you'll see those come up. And we call it almost because the results we come back with to the user, we want the project manager to look at that feedback and say, almost. And the reason we want that is, the way people think about this is, when you start with something, it's always harder to start with a blank sheet. It's always harder to start with nothing. But if you start with something that's perfect, or looks really, really good, you're 90% of the way there, they might look at it and say, it's good enough. And they walk away. Our theory is that the sweet spot is around that 70 to 80%. So you can look at this and say, that's almost there. So let me go fix this. Let me go adjust it. Let me get engaged in this and let me do something with it and get it to where it should be. And that's really where we want to get. And our theory is that the more engaged we can get people to go in and select from that list of potential risks. After I import those risks into my risk register, am I going into those risks and saying, AI suggested this was 50% probability of happening? I think it's more like 85. So I'm going to move that slider. We want to engage, and we want to use it as a tool to pull project managers in, make it quick and easy to update. And that way we have their intelligence. We can help leverage their ability and get through more work faster and easier. And in that process, what we're really doing, as I mentioned earlier, is it's not so much the user prompting the AI. It really becomes almost the AI prompting the user. And so our next generation, which we're going to release here in the next month or so, is we are going to be actively prompting the user back. Instead of our project manager saying, hey, AI, give me these risks, we're going to make it an interactive conversation. And in fact, let me give you a quick demo of that, and I'll make this will be quick. This is modeled in, or modeling this in Python. So here is, can you see this okay? Can you see my screen? I'm not seeing it in my, okay. So you can see my prompt here. It says here, I'm a prototype. Just want to make sure you can see this. Okay. So here's my prototype, and then it says, oh, let's start by entering a project description. I say, I want to build a barn. Yeah. Not super specific, definitely not specific enough to really come back and tell us a lot about it. And so here's the interaction that we're going to be releasing and say, okay, well, that's nice, but I need additional details about the project. And we want the AI to be specific about what information it needs to give a good risk log. So how big is the barn? Where's the barn going to be? What are you going to do with the barn? And if I come back with something stupid and I say, I want to build a big old barn, is it going to think that's enough information? There we go. And so as you can see here, it's coming back with, nope, still looking for more information. So if I say, okay, I want to build a 20 by 20-foot barn to house my 100 chickens. I want to build it in my backyard in Phoenix, Arizona. I will build it out of wood, primarily. Oh, you can't see the demo. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to reshare. How about that? Can you see it now? I think you can see it now. Okay. So I'll walk through what I did was I initially prompted. It said, give me your project description. And I said, hey, I want to build a barn. And it came back and said, no, I don't really understand that. I need more info. How big is the barn? Where is the barn? What's the purpose of the barn? And I said, I want to build a big barn. I even misspelled it. And it came back and it said, I still basically haven't provided enough information. So I'm going to come back and say, yeah, I want to build a 20 by 20-foot barn to house my 100 chickens. I want to build it in my backyard, and I will build it myself. And I see a question, basically the same that you would happen in a human interaction just on screen. Yep. And so, yeah, now it's going to come back and say, thank you for the additional details. With this information, we can begin to assess the risks. Now provide a specific risk. I don't know, wood. Worried about wood. Is that enough information to go off of? If a stakeholder told me I'm worried about wood, I'd say, I need to know a little bit more about that. And say, okay, I understand wood is the primary material for your project. Can you provide specific risks? And here we're teaching the project manager how to talk about risks. You might be worried about what's the problem and what's the impact. So we are prompting them, we're teaching them how to describe a risk in a problem impact statement, right? So I won't go too much more into this, but that's kind of what we're trying to get into is we're trying to prompt and pull that into. Now, we're doing this in Python for prototype purposes to get the prompts down. The actual user interface will be, of course, a little bit cleaner and nicer, but this is what we're getting to. We want to prompt the user, and that's really going to be our goal here. So I'm going to go back to my presentation and reshare. One second here. There we go. All right, we're back to the deck. So After that, our next goal with our product is to use this kind of prompting methodology to pull project managers in using our Malmos principle to get them deeper into the risk management process. Because as risk managers, I won't say lazy, we'll say we've got a lot to do, so we have to be very efficient with our time, right? And most of the time, what we see and what we know is that when project managers do their risk planning, they do their risk register, putting a title to a risk, description, maybe categorizing it, assigning an owner, estimating probability impact, maybe a trigger date, and a response plan. That's pretty much bread and butter stuff. That's what if you're going to sit down and create a risk log, that's pretty much the stuff you do. What we don't really usually see is somebody going to the next level of the things you do, which is what are the residual probability and impacts after you do your response plan? What's the financial impact of this thing? I mean, if you've gone through that process, it's really challenging. It's really hard to wrap your head around potential financial costs and impacts of a risk. What's the residual financial impact if I implement this response plan? I mean, that's a lot of thought. That's a lot of time to sit there and think about and talk with your team. What if we can use our Malmos principle and then prompt the project manager with that? It pulls them into that process. And if I, as a project manager, is really easy for me to show the value of our risk planning and risk response planning, that's really good for me and it's good for the portfolio leader as well. And then eventually we can get into things like what's our contingency plan, not just our response plan, but contingency plans. If we can just prompt with one, contingency budgets, next update date, things like that. So we want to pull the project manager through using our Malmos principles. And you can look forward to seeing that probably later this year. All right, and so those are a little bit of our blueprints, kind of where we started to get into AI, some of the bumps we came across, and some of the breakthroughs that we've had. And so, in summary, our perspective is AI is it's surprising. It really is. And we're going to continue to be surprised for quite a long time on what these tools can do for us. But it's only as good as the AI's training data and the prompt from the user. So the prompt is something that we really need to pay attention to. Whatever tools you use, test the bounds. Approach it with a really critical eye. Don't ever put full credibility in any kind of tool that's AI based. Think of it at best as 70% at best. And also be pragmatic about what you get. Use your Malmos principle and really look at it. Don't just click, it's done, and walk away. And that is our presentation for today. Thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only Kim Essendrup out there. So please connect to me. If you want to take a closer look at what we're doing, you can go check us out at raidlog.com. And there you go.
Thank you, Kim. We were pretty amazed by what you showed us. It's pretty neat, for sure. And we do have a few questions, and we do have a few minutes before we wrap up. So let me put them like this so everybody can see it.
Oh, great. Like your example of a single purpose-built specialized AI tool, the AI tool would act like a risk analyst assistant. I totally agree. And our guess is that that's where this is going to go, is that you're going to have AI tools that are really good at very specific things. And I think that makes sense because it's ultimately, you've got large language models that are really good at general things, but over time, what's going to happen is we're going to learn how to structure data, and you're going to learn how to learn from your data. So if you go to a large language model and say, hey, what are the things that can happen in an exchange migration project? It'll give you more generic answers. But if my organization has done 50 of those, I want to learn from those 50 projects, right? And so I think specific AI tool, specific experts is where we're going to see real value come out. However, the human PMs have to know and understand the basics of the trait. Yep. I agree. And I think it's something that we're all learning how to use these tools. And I think over time, hopefully people will learn that, okay, this is how the tool works. And I think smart tools, which is what we want to strive to be, a smart tool teaches the user. And that's really our goal. I hope that answers your question, Karsten. Thanks for the great question.
Awesome question. Okay, and let's see one more from Rosa. Coming up.
Was it easy to train your AI for being able to give them almost answers? Yes and no. You know, it's really weird. You know, when we work with AI tools, you know, you hear the term black box, and that there is some truth to that, because you think you're doing pretty good, and all of a sudden the AI goes insane. And so that's why we spend a lot of time in testing and training and working through these things. Is it's fine, and where did that come from? I have no idea. So it's something we're really careful of. And I have to honestly, I'm kind of glad that we realized that that going Malmost was really the right way to go, because to close the gap between a 70% solution and 100% solution, or say, let's be honest, say 90%, that would have been just astronomically difficult in investment and time. So it actually kind of worked out in our favor that this kind of solution is really, we think, is the best way to go. We think it's not just us being lazy, but it's the right thing to do. But yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.
Well,
so Kim, this was amazing, and because it was so amazing, and probably a lot of people here have so many follow-up questions. If everybody wants to, because we actually do have a short break anyway, 15 minutes, so we have the chance to network. You all know that reception area where you first landed when you enter the conference. You can go, there's a lounge there where you have the tables. You can go and feel free to network. Kim, if you'd like to stay around and maybe talk to people or join the other sessions, of course. But yeah, this was really good, and I think probably that will help having some more private discussions about this, because it's definitely something that most people are looking for.
super. Yeah, I'll see if I can get into one of those sessions, and if anybody would like to join, happy to talk more about this. Maybe I can run through a couple scenarios with you in the tool and let you see how it works, or just we can nerd out about project management and risk block and that kind of stuff. So that's all good too.
Star Wars. Great, amazing presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your energy, for your chat. Again, 15-minute break, and then we are up and running with a sponsor session. Our title sponsor keyed in 15 minutes. And yeah, so please be sure to be back. Do not enjoy the networking in the meantime. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.